Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Conscious Caregiver Conversations. I hope that everyone is having a good week up to this point. And if you've faced challenges, hopefully you've been able to navigate them, be with them, learn from them. We are just waiting on our dear sister Samantha. There she is.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Let's just say all the things.
Yes, it's like that that movie. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes it feels we're a little bit. That's when he's in that TV show, isn't he?
Yeah,
the characters in the TV show. It's sometimes
the Truman
a bit like that.
Show.
Yes.
Yes, it does feel like that.
Okay,
from time to time.
I am so glad I get to see your pretty face this week. I'm so happy it's working at my end. I know it has been working, so thank goodness for that. But I'm so glad I get to see, like, we can actually have a conversation. And I smudged and I really intentionally sat here for a few minutes and cleared the space and cleared this container and really asked for our electronics to work very well, and look what's happened. So I am so grateful for this, to be able to see your face as I'm talking to you.
No coincidences.
Not at all. Not at all. So today I was wondering, should we, hello, we have some people on live, which is beautiful. I thought, Jenna, should we start today just by checking in to see where we're actually at? Because I think that in itself is very, very powerful, and I think we often don't do that. We just go to work and we come back and, just get on with our lives and maybe try and switch off when we're not at work and, try and do all the things. But there's actually a lot to be said for taking a moment, as we talk about taking lots of different intentional moments, but to actually check in with a trusted colleague or friend, mentor, and to actually see how we are. Because again, we've had both quite different weeks, but both stressful in their own ways. So how are you going, Sister Jenna? How are you traveling this week?
It's been a bumpy ride, as it usually is. So it's been ups and downs, as it usually is. And yesterday I was kind of dealing with a lot of agitation. And it's very interesting because in this journey that we talk about, we often look at how we can show up as our best selves. What does that look like? And the importance of processing through our emotions, healing our traumas and our wounding, all of these different things, so that we can really show up in situations very clearly. Because the truth is that we are going to see situations around us through the lenses of our own wounding and trauma. going to color our perception, which is then going to trigger whatever response comes out. And a lot of times we are responding or reacting rather to what is happening in our present based on what has happened in our past. And so that makes that aspect of this journey really important. But one of the things that I have really been embracing and learning since starting to work with a homeopath is to really honor my feelings and even allow my feelings in a way that I haven't before, because the societal expectation or the corporate expectation or whatever it might be. So yesterday, I was dealing with a lot of agitation. I had agitation through the night because of something that happened related to social media on Monday night, had a really difficult time sleeping, and then woke up and was still kind of agitated, and it carried out through the day. And I'm still very cognizant and very conscious that I don't necessarily want to verbally vomit on somebody else. But that being said, really allowing myself to be in that space, which is super uncomfortable, because as a leader and as somebody, working in the healthcare environment, needing to show up a certain way, that is a little scary for me, because, when we're in that space of agitation, when we're in that space of frustration, is a lot of times when we tend to be reactive, and we say something and then we're like, oh shoot, But I think I navigated it okay. It's interesting because I actually had some really nice things happen too, where one of my colleagues actually gave me a $10 credit at our coffee cafe. Like, she went to the coffee cafe when, on her own, and told, the lady that usually works there, put $10 on Jenna's account. And I didn't know about it until she told me, the lady at the coffee cafe. And so I had some really nice things like that happen. I had some leadership that was really complimentary of my staff. But it was interesting because even with all of those good things, I was still feeling this agitation. And my homeopath was kind of saying, like, well, that's the quote unquote rebel version of Jenna, which again, I really urge and encourage in this conscious caregiver journey that you find ways to be the rebel, but in a way that's very professional and keeps you grounded and centered and all of that. But at the same time, in a way she's right, because it's this version of Jenna who is going to say what's on her mind and all of that and be like, it is what it is, and not care per se. And whereas, like, it's super uncomfortable because the inner child Jenna, who hears all of the don't act like that, don't behave like that, don't say things like that, wants to bring me back into that comfort level of not rocking the boat. But at the same time, we know that if we're going to influence massive amounts of change, we're going to rock the boat. And so it's interesting, Samantha and I have been having these conversations about, being the good girl and stuff like that. One of the things that I'm really challenged with as a leader is that I feel as though I am often saying things or backpedaling on things that I have said to protect the feelings of my employees, which actually can send really confusing messages to them, because, I'll say something and then I'll see their response and I'm like, oh no, like, I don't want them to be upset. I don't want them to feel this. I don't want them to feel that. And so I start to kind of like get wishy-washy, right? And the thing is we can still be caring and we can still care for others and we can still be sensitive to how other people are feeling. But at the same time, provide clear direction and clear expectations. So these are all things that are really challenging for me that I've been navigating, but really trying to just, be professional, be polite, be understanding, but also like, this is what I need. And so an example of that was we have monthly education that we do where I have a topic for them, specific resources that I need them to educate the staff about, and they have sign-in sheets, and the sign-in sheets have everybody's name pre-written in there, and they have to go around and get the signatures of the staff for the units that they are educating for. And I received a couple of sign-in sheets that were less than 50%. And so I had to go to that employee and just say, listen, you should be getting a minimum of like 80% of the staff. I realize that a lot of the staff are per diem and they can be really hard to catch and all of that. But education is important. Otherwise, why are we doing it? So when I give you an assignment and I tell you that I need you to educate the staff, I expect that the majority of this sheet is full, not the opposite. And so I just went to her and I said, listen, I can't accept this. It needs to be like 75 to 80% complete. It can't be, it can't be this empty. And that was it. And she's like, oh, I guess I'll have to, whatever. And I was like, okay, like you do what you got to do to get it done, but it needs to get done. You have an entire month to do it. If you need more time, we can have that conversation. But, this is because I've literally gotten sign-in sheets on education that have 3 signatures. And I've just kind of like been annoyed by it, but let it go. And it's like, no, I can't do that. Like, why are we even educating then? Like, this is a joke, So it's just stuff like that has been hard for me, honestly. And, one of the things about being a leader is I'm not there to be their friend. And it's super hard because we have such a small department and I want us all to, be friends and be family and all of that. But at the end of the day, I'm their boss and they're my employees. So, it's me and them. And it can feel very lonely sometimes, but it's what it is because, it kind of reminds me of a parent who would rather be friends with their child than parent them. It's kind of the same idea. Like at the end of the day, like I want us to get along and, get to know one another personally and be able to have fun together. But, when decisions have to be made, I'm their boss and they're my employees. And that can be really hard. But, just stuff like that I'm navigating and learning through and, realizing that I've been super frustrated and agitated with a lot of things at work, like we have talked about in previous episodes, because at the end of the day, they're trying to figure out where the boundaries are, and my boundaries have just been like, so that's really on me. A lot of their behavior is reflective of the fact that I haven't given them clear boundaries. So, yeah. So that's kind of all the stuff that I've been working through. Started my day this morning with tears, whatever. It's all good. Things did get better. So, but yeah, I literally sat in my office this morning and cried.
Yeah. And that's so important to be very real about that as well. And I take notes now just for our audience when Jenna talks, because we unpack a lot of things and I need to write notes down. But this is beautiful because so often some things in life I think are very simple, and as humans we overcomplicate them. But we are complex creatures and we live in a complex world. And I simply asked you how you were going. I'm checking in with you, and this came up. But it's a good thing, Jenna. Don't be like, it's a good thing because that's Jenna. Like everything we can talk about. It is so Jenna. But the point of going deep is that there's a lot of things that can be going on, as to then why you're not showing up as your best self, why you're reacting to what's happening in the present moment, why you have agitation and anger, why it may be hard to anchor in gratitude or positive things that happen, why there are so many complex emotions that are coming up. There are difficult conversations that are happening. There's hierarchy in healthcare, which is difficult to navigate. There are boundaries that we need to put in place, and sometimes unfair boundaries that are placed on us. And that was just from, a 10-minute conversation about how your week's going. So this is really important, I think, to identify that one of the best things about checking in, again, with someone who's trusted and can hold space and can have that confidence, and maybe someone who even can have that skill of helping you break all this down. Because when we have all of this just in our heads and we're not even taking time to maybe even express much of this, you are going to get times of just verbal diarrhea and vomit and reactiveness, because this is all what's happening inside, whether it's in our head, whether it's in our body, whether it's in our heart space, somatically, whatever it might be. That's a lot to unpack. And it's so beautiful, because I think, I wasn't even intending for this live necessarily to go on this tangent, but by checking in with someone, and I think that's also important to note, that when we do check in with someone, check in when you have the space and time to be able to hold someone in that as well. Because often when we allow that door to open, it's like we get, we might just be in receiving mode of what's going on, because so often we don't take that time and regularly take that time. Jenna and I talk almost every day. We check in with each other and have some sort of debrief, and it's usually quite brief as such, because we're on opposite sides of the world with time frames and everything. But it's still so important, and that's a regular check-in. So that is beautiful how we unpack that. I want to say as well, it's also to me, this is just a great example of how working with a coach or a mentor, especially if you're not familiar with what mentoring is or what coaching is, or you've not had a good experience with that, this is where actually working with someone, it's so much nicer than having to think you've got to deal with it all yourself and you need to figure it all out yourself. It is, like we keep saying, it is a journey, and to be supported in that journey at times with a mentor or a coach, that is really, really supportive and really nourishing. So when we ask what's going on in your workplace, what's been happening, what are you dealing with, please hit us with what it is and what's really been pressing you, because we can help you break that down. And then I'm sure if you're going through something like Jenna, with all these things, there has got to be so many healthcare providers, so many caregivers that are experiencing, perhaps in a different way or in a different department or, in a different role, but will be experiencing those same things as well, definitely. My week has often been filled with some of these, so that's just absolutely on point. I did want to touch on, because we have spoken about this as well together personally, but with the anger and agitation, it's such a different thing, especially for the more feminine side, whether you're male or female. But if you're in touch with your feminine side, it is so hard to feel where is the right and safe space to express anger and agitation, because often in a professional capacity, it's not accepted anymore, and it still does happen, especially when it's obviously emergency cases and traumatic cases. There is time when agitation is definitely expressed, and maybe to an extent there is a need for that when there's a time factor and there's a human life involved. But in a general sense, I often feel, again, with that good girl, and I want to open this up to even, obviously males and females can be caregivers, whether you identify in whatever capacity, but expressing anger can be so frowned upon. But I think there's some really beautiful ways, and I know you've done some practices this week, Jenna, and I know we can't go into a lot of depth because, geez, we've already spoken for 20 minutes, which is beautiful. But would you be able to just share a couple of things on how you tried to move through that anger in a way that wasn't necessarily in your workplace, although crying is a way to actually move a lot of energy through. So if that happens in your workplace. Find a safe space, close the door, take a few minutes, definitely. But what are some of the ways you have been able to move through that anger and not have it come, especially as a director, like you really have a responsibility not to be angry or not to, be even aggressive obviously in your workplace. How have you moved through that this week?
Yeah, so I guess to some degree I did kind of allow it a little bit, and I think the way that it tends to come out for me is I just kind of have a little bit of a tone in my voice. I'm not overly nasty or anything like that, but you can kind of tell that I'm a little irritated, and just, I allowed it to a degree without being overly nasty and inappropriate. I think, like I said, it really just comes through in a little bit of a tone of voice sometimes, which I'm really careful about too. It's interesting. I'm very sensitive to the whole tone of voice thing and have had to really give myself a lot of grace and release judgment of myself when I have a tone of voice, because it's something that was very challenging and still can be very challenging for me with my dad, which is where a lot of my things, my wounding that I've had to work through comes from. So it's interesting because so much, as you're going through this journey and becoming really consciously aware, you will often find that the behaviors that frustrated you about someone else, particularly if you're super close to them, you have a lot of those behaviors. And that's something that was a huge realization and has required a lot of conscious and intentional work as well, because so much of my frustration growing up came from the way my dad would talk to me, and then I found myself talking to other people in the same way, particularly my husband. So it's kind of interesting how that shows up for you when you're doing this work. Everyone truly is a mirror. But when it comes with trying to work through and release some of the agitation, I am actually somebody who, when I get really angry, I cry. So sometimes, depending on the situation, if I'm angry, it will actually cause me to cry, and crying is a great release. Ideally, especially at the workplace, I try to do that in my office behind closed doors. Sometimes I can't help it. I'm one of those people that, if I'm gonna cry, I'm gonna cry, which is challenging depending on who you're with. So a lot of emotion that I've had to hold back in the past is usually when I feel like I'm going to cry and there's certain people in front of me, like my CEO, for example, that I don't want to cry in front of because she's my CEO, for heaven's sake. So, choking it back kind of thing, the throat tightens and you're like, oh my God, don't cry, don't cry. I remember one time we had a meeting, one of our patient experience meetings that's with the whole leadership team. And, it just got to a point where some of my colleagues, were kind of trying to comfort me and asking me some questions. And I had the notebook up because I didn't want her to see me, but I couldn't help it. The emotion just wanted to come forth. But of course, then some of my other colleagues came over and they're like, "Don't cry, it's not personal," and emotion is so uncomfortable for people. I just want you to know, especially in the corporate world, I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this. Emotion is really uncomfortable for people, and I think we as healthcare providers need to start getting more comfortable with the fact that people are going to emote, and it's normal, because people hold it back and then it gets choked down and it causes other issues. But I digress. So in any event, aside from crying, one of the things that I actually did do also, I think I did this yesterday, is I went in my office, I took off my big bulky badge, put it on my desk, and I kind of like shook up and down. I was just like, woo, and just trying to like shake out the energy. I really, when the agitation first came in, all I could think about, it was like 10 something at night, and all I could think was, I wish I could go to the gym and like go absolutely crazy on like a heavy bag, like I literally just wanted to punch and kick things. Like that's what I wanted to do. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen at 10 o'clock at night. Like, but that's how I was feeling. Like I was so angry, and the rage was just like boiling up inside of me, which by the way, it really wasn't even anything to become like rageful about, but I just think it like evoked like a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of anger. A lot of times those of us who are sensitive are not just processing our own anger, we're processing collective anger, we're processing ancestral anger. So if you feel like you're having a really inappropriate, let's say, level of anger for a situation, it's probably not about that situation. That situation might have sparked it, but it's evoking anger in you that you've been holding for who knows how long and for who knows how many people. So, I mean, I just wanted to like beat the ever loving crap out of something, is how I felt. But, aside from that,
and did you punch some pillows, Jenna? Did you tell me that you actually did throw some pillows? And I mean, because that is a I guess a less if you can't get to the gym or you don't have a boxing bag at home, obviously we're not encouraging to actually damage walls or obviously not hit people as well. So something like, and sometimes it's very confronting to feel such a huge ragey emotion. Like it's big, like it's uncomfortable to see someone in that. It's uncomfortable to sometimes feel it. So maybe that's just my own personal experience, but I have punched pillows.
Yeah.
And thrown pillows, which for me is like, whoa, like Sam's throwing things, So that is quite expressive as well. So that's just as a side note. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. So I punched my pillow a little bit before I went to bed, but it was not sufficient. It was not sufficient for how I was feeling. I've also taken a pillow into my closet and screamed into it. So like you literally have the pillow over your face and you're just, but like it's muffled, right? So you're not like, assaulting the ears of people around you or concerning people, because it's muffled and it's just your face in the pillow and you're just screaming as loud as you can. I've done that in my car too. I have had plenty, especially this year, plenty of circumstances where I would just scream at the top of my lungs inside my car, beating the steering wheel, to the point where my hands hurt sometimes. When you're in a circumstance, particularly if you're at work and you're feeling incredibly frustrated, the best thing that I could recommend, other than, taking a couple minutes to allow yourself to emote in terms of crying or jumping up and down and shaking and trying to move the energy, is see if you have the time to go out to your car and get in the car, windows up, the whole deal, loud music if you want, and just scream it out in your car, because sometimes it really does, like, the anger and the rage and the frustration and all of the things that we feel within ourselves are, they're big emotions sometimes. And so they require a big, release. And, so when you can be in those situations where you're, in the car with music on and nobody can hear you and you can just scream at the top of your lungs, you're going to emerge a couple minutes later feeling a whole lot better. But sometimes that's just what we need to do, and these are healthy ways to do it. We don't so much of the violence and all of that we see in our lives. If you look at those people, they didn't have a good outlet. They really didn't have a good outlet, and so they just had this rage come out in the form of I mean, I just it even takes me back, like the image that I'm being shown actually is that just dropped in for me is back in 1999 when we had the Columbine High School shooting here in the U.S. And the anger that these high school boys felt because of the way they were being bullied and all of this other stuff. And I mean, to literally take sawed-off shotguns into a high school and shoot up a whole bunch of people, like, that's a whole lot of repressed anger, you guys, with like no outlet. So, it's just, I feel like so much of the violence that happens to that magnitude is really because, people just they've had difficult things happen to them. They've had no way to really express what they need to express, and it just comes out in these really intense, violent ways. And any of us can feel that. And again, it's not always stuff that you're just processing for yourself. It's stuff you could be processing for the collective. It's stuff you could be processing for your patients. It's stuff you could be processing for your ancestry. And so, sometimes I can't tell you how many times I would look back at my life and say, like, yeah, I had some tough times and I had some, really like knockdown, drag out fights with my dad and like all this kind of stuff. But like sometimes the level of rage and anger that I feel is like, really, like, it's not mine. It's stuff that I've been carrying for other people, for my ancestry, for, my mother who was, abused. And like, there's so much more to it. And so on one hand, it can feel really burdening. But on the other hand, it's a beautiful opportunity to not only heal for yourself, but heal for those who came before you and heal for those who are going to come after you.
Exactly. And I think that's just so vulnerably and so well put, Jenna. I think we often mistake feeling any sort of anger at, oh my gosh, it's horrific, there's something wrong with me, like I'm not a violent person, like, we associate, and anger is a very powerful emotion for us to recognize, and like all our emotions that we feel. And I think that we need to stop even shaming, and shame itself, but shaming anger, because we do that often with our children, our little ones. Don't be angry, don't have a tantrum, you need to just be calm and whatever. And it's a normal human experience, a part of our human experience, to have anger, because we get angry about things. And like you said as well, Jenna, it's not just our own experience in this one lifetime that might be, triggering that anger. There is so much. We are connected. We are a connected species. We live in communities. We have lots of information about what's happening in the world, and that alone, nevertheless, if you look at ancestral, generational traumas, healings that need to happen, like it's so huge. And I think that that's such an important point, probably to finish on today, is that being able to navigate the big emotions that we do feel, and being emotionally aware and emotionally intelligent is part of what we are teaching within the conscious caregiver role. And it helps so much when you have more of an idea on what's going on in here emotionally, but also what's happening out there with people that you're interacting with, especially with our patients, who are usually in an altered state as well, whether it be pain, whether it be other factors. So it's very important but the awareness starts with us, as we say. It's that self-responsibility, and it's not about shaming any of our emotions that we feel. It's about navigating them. And again, that's what we're here to teach, parts of how to navigate, parts of becoming aware of what these big emotions are and not shying away from them, knowing that we have the strength and we have the resilience within and the love within ourselves to be able to express all different things, and for it to be messy and for it to be, awkward sometimes, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think that is absolutely beautiful, Jenna. Is there anything you would like to finish on today? I'll let you finish off, but I just wanted to say, of course, pop in the comments, DM either of us if there's anything in particular going on in your workplace that you're really struggling with, something that's come up lots, something that keeps repeating itself. Please let us know, and we are happy to make a live just on that, and really give you some tips and some coaching advice. And of course, we will. What's it called when you de-identify any workplace or whatever it might be? So I know that there can be, especially, I don't know about the US, but here in Australia, there's a lot of, don't put anything on social media from your workplace and stuff like that. So we can definitely de-identify a lot of that and be there to help you. So I'll leave you with Jenna to finish off today's live and conversation.
Yeah, so next time when we have a conversation, I'm going to ask Sam how she's doing.
I did think about that. I know, I did think about that, because my week has looked quite different because I'm actually on leave. But I'm like, there were so many parts to what you brought up, Jenna, that are really important, to look at. And it was like, and then, if I bring which some of this is actually what I've been feeling as well, so it's not unrelated at all. But yeah, so next time you can definitely ask me that. We'll do Ask Sam how she's going next time.
Yes.
But also, as a note for our listeners, hop on. Yes, we've got our YouTube channel, which these recordings are on, but also follow Jenna and myself on Instagram, because I do share on my stories where I'm at and what things have been happening, and different things that have been going on. So if you want to see where we're at and how we actually move through our days, our life, not every 5 seconds, not everything that we're eating or whatever, but the big things that we're feeling, please follow us on Instagram as well, because that way you sort of have a bit of a background about where we're coming from and in real time how we're moving through different things. So that's a really good point as well. And yes, next week you can ask me how I am.
Yes, next week we will ask you. But the one thing that I do want to emphasize, and it's something that I'm really learning, and I think Sam did a nice job of touching on this as well as she was recapping me, is the fact that, we talk a lot about showing up as our best selves and what does that look like, and it's very, very important. And as you go through this journey, you're going to be able to more and more show up as your best self, right? But I think one of the things that I actually personally started doing with it, and this is no discredit to my mentors, and others that I follow in the spiritual and healing journey arena that talk about, the whole best self. But I think for me, I actually found myself trying to hold myself to that standard and not really honoring the parts of me that would show up as not my best self, and almost judging it, especially when it comes to work. And again, I still don't want to show up to work being a complete jerk, right? I feel very passionately about the fact that, my stuff is my stuff, and I don't want to be projecting onto other people. But that being said, I am human. I have been through some stuff. I am holding things within me that still need healing. And so we have to give ourselves a lot of grace, and we have to let it flow. We have to just allow the emotion to flow. Because if we halt it, if we try to stop it, if we try to hold it back, it's going to create that stagnant energy. It's going to create stagnancy. It's not going to allow the emotion to move. And we're going to have a harder and harder time releasing it. And so I think that's something that, is particularly in working with my homeopath, I'm really working to honor. And the cool thing about homeopathy is that it's energy medicine. And so its job is not to suppress, as we're so used to with conventional medicine. Its job is really to help the emotion flow, to help clear layers that are ready to be cleared in order for new layers to be unearthed. And so, as beautiful as the homeopathy journey has been, it's also been very challenging because it's going to bring up that agitation that I'm ready to let flow and release. It's going to bring up, some of the different emotions, the anxiety, the fear that, I'm ready to release. One of the things, I was on anti-anxiety medication for over a decade, for my anxiety, but I'm actually learning now that I've been off that medicine for almost a year and using homeopathy to support that the anxiety actually shows up and is signaling me when I am getting ready to do something differently. And so when I'm starting to have the awareness now around the fact that when anxiety is showing up, it's just because I'm getting ready to have a difficult conversation, or I'm getting ready to do something in a way that I wouldn't have done it in the past. And it's not a bad thing. Like, that's the point that I guess I'm trying to illustrate. I hope I'm doing an okay job of it, but it's not a bad thing. It's just alerting me to the fact that, okay, Jenna, you're getting ready to stand up for yourself in a way that you might not have done before, and not in a nasty or an unprofessional way, but just in a way that you haven't done before. Setting boundaries in a way that you've been afraid to before, just different things like that. But again, here's the thing. If you're on this conscious caregiver journey, if you're even on a journey to heal yourself, period, you are on a big mission. And when you're on a big mission, it's going to call you forward to do things that you would not have done this way before. And so for me, it's important to notice that and to rise up into it anyway, because I have a huge mission, right? And so, but in order to be able to rise to the occasion for my mission, I have to start recognizing that where I'm at currently and grow through that. And so, yeah, it's just, just allowing it to flow, starting to be able to see things in a different light. Before, I just wanted to run from my anxiety. I just wanted to suppress my anxiety, and it still doesn't feel good. Like, I'm not sitting here going yay, anxiety. But what I am starting to see my anxiety for is, just the fact that I am stepping into another stage of my growth, and it's not something to run from. It's just signaling me hey, you're about to do something differently, so just take a deep breath and let's go. So it's really interesting. And just let it flow, just be with it, just honor it. Don't try to run from it. Don't try to suppress it. It's there for a reason. It's there to show you something. And, as you continue to grow through your stages of healing, it's not going to show up the same way. Will just keep changing as you evolve. So, yeah, I just think that's really important, and really honoring yourself, giving yourself grace, not judging yourself. And, just letting it flow.
And they are all parts of what we believe a conscious caregiver embodies, so many of those aspects. So, yeah, and it's all a journey. All right, darling, until next week, thank you to all our listeners. We will pop this up on YouTube when we can. Obviously, we work a lot, so we're very busy lives. So if it's a little bit delayed, don't worry, it'll be up on YouTube, and we will share bits and pieces and links as they come available. All right, darling Jenna, until next week.
Yes,
have a
until
fabulous
next week.
Bye, darling.
Bye.